Alright, so this video is about what we call a rotating piston. Now, I've been working on cars for a long time, but I've never come across a piston like this. Okay, and I've been told this is very commonplace on some cars. Some cars, either on the front brakes or the rear brakes, have these pistons called rotating pistons. Now, how do you know it's rotating piston? And I'll let you know that the reason why we're not out here doing this on an actual car, I just did it, by the way. It's cold outside, and I think with me talking and the image there, you can more than easily figure it out. Let me tell you something. Do not use a piston compressing tool on this piston. Do not. A piston compressing tool is designed to push a piston in that isn't a rotating piston. So how do you know if your piston is a rotating piston? Well, you can see from the picture. You see, in the picture you can see someone using a two-pronged tool that goes inside of these two holes, one on opposite ends of this piston. Now there's like 7 or 8 different configurations. The way that you know that your piston is a rotating piston is because it has some resemblance to these notches. The notches can be inside the body, the perimeter of the piston surface, or it can be cut into the edges. It could take the form of a wedge. It could take the form of a semicircle. It can take a number of forms. In fact, you can buy a tool, a square tool that looks like a cube, and there's like 7 or 8 different types of designs they have for this. And then in that cube, on each side of each face of this cube, you have an opening for a 3/8 ratchet. And so what you do is you take it, you find the one that you need, and you ratchet the piston clockwise. You're turning it to where it turns all the way into the piston, into the caliper. Now, I want to tell you that the reason why I'm doing this video is because if you use a compressing caliper tool, it will bust the brake line. Okay? Or it will cause you to damage, no, not the brake line, take that back. It will damage the caliper. And you'll have to go out and get a new caliper and bleed your brakes and all the rest of it. It will not damage the brake line. It will damage the caliper. And one thing before I forget, whenever you're pushing a piston in, always be sure and remove the cap to the master cylinder under the engine, under the hood. Always remove the master cylinder cap from the master cylinder to allow air to flow up through there. Okay, so it is actually very easy to turn the piston. It's a clockwise motion. But the thing is, you don't have to use the tool that the auto parts store will sell you. I used a pair of needle nose pliers, and I didn't have to worry. You just squeeze the needle nose pliers down into the middle as far in as they can go. Doesn't matter. You will be able to turn it even if that's not your maximum leverage. You don't have to adjust the pliers to where they're all the way out by the edge to get maximum torque. You can easily do this by just getting a hold of the inside of these 2 wedges and you press down the pliers. That gives you a nice good grip, and then you can just turn it that way. So you turn the piston clockwise. It goes in easier than spit. But I cannot emphasize this enough. You got to make sure that you don't use the compression tool because it will damage the caliper. And you'll have a big problem. Okay, I saw a YouTube video on the internet, YouTube, and I have been set back for a month or 2 because of that video. Why? They didn't do anything wrong in the video that they actually showed, but when they were showing how to compress the piston, they only did the front wheel. Because if they'd have done the rear wheel, then they would have had to show you that you have to turn the piston in, which they did not do. And because of this, I have been wrestling with this job for 2 months because I had like, how do I do this? How do I get this? The piston was seized. The piston was not seized. The video producer simply failed to show the rotating piston on the back wheel of the brake system. So I'm showing it to you, and you can use whatever tool you want to. If you think you can get inside of those 2 notches and turn that thing, and you will be so happy because, believe it or not, after having done it this morning for the first time, I love it. I think it's brilliant. Because you know what I really hate doing? I really hate having to take a caliper off and having to use this tool to stick up in there, and you don't know if the tool that you use is small enough to even get in there. You don't know how far that piston is out. I bought a tool. I bought a tool for this caliper, and you know the problem is? The problem is those piston compressing tools are too big for the rear brakes because the rear brakes are smaller. Another thing I did. I'd never had a car with rear disc brakes. I'm going to tell you something else about rear disc brakes. It's a different kind of rotor and it's a different size shoe. You cannot go to the salvage yard and say, like I did, the rear wheels are still on there. I don't want to hassle with it. The front tires are off. I'm just going to take my rotor and take my shoes off of the front tire. Well, I got news for you. On disc brakes on the rear tire, the caliper is half the size of the front, and the rotor isn't that two-banger. The rotor just has one side to it, and you cannot put it on the front, and you can't put the front on the back. So, when you go to the salvage yard, if it's for the rear tire, you got to get your rotor and your shoes off of that rear wheel. There's just no way around it. So, I'm sitting here with a front rotor and front brakes that I can't even use on this tire. Well, you know something? That's fine. I'm going to wait until I need to do my front brakes, and guess what? I've already got the shoes and the rotor for one side already in my garage. Ain't that something? The power of positive thinking. So, don't ever look at anything as a waste. Don't ever look about anything as a waste of time, because I tell you what, God's taught me all kinds of patience through this. And when I finally got the rotor off and I finally got this piston rotated in, I'm like, you know something? I gained something that I wouldn't have gained otherwise. God had a plan. I know in my heart I'm a better person for having done these 2 jobs because I have had 2 experiences where I was set back for 2 whole months. Richard, how many times did I complain about you that this job was taking me forever?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And now, the next time I go to work or I have to deal with somebody who's difficult, I have been through a situation that is beyond difficult. And you know something? That's the way God is. Whenever He's putting you through a tough time, whenever you're frustrated, it's how you handle it. Here's how I got myself through it. Every time I went to try to work on this job, I made progress. I always made progress. Anytime you do something, and sometimes the progress that you make is knowing how not to do it, right? Sometimes half the battle, half the job is going through and making your mistakes. And you know something? You learn from them. And then when you go and maybe decide to do a YouTube video, you can go and take all those experiences that you had and say, don't do it like this. Before you tell them how to do it right, you tell them how not to do it. And you save that person all kinds of trouble. And guess what? They subscribe to your channel because you're a great guy, because you went and you helped them out. I did this with a sink video a while back. All these videos for the sink are so horrible. And I went through my share of mistakes with it. But when I made all my mistakes, I shared them with the audience. And you know how many thank yous I've gotten for that? Guess what? You're fixing to try this. Don't do it. Let me tell you the tool you got to have and how you got to do it, how you hold the tool, and what tool and what it applies to. You can always help others when you make mistakes. Just remember, making those mistakes is the best part of the job. Doing the job correctly is easy. You have the right tools, you know how to do it. When I have to go do the passenger side rear brake, guess what I'm going to do with that job? I'm going to kick it in the rear end. If I'm not even going to try to remove the retaining screw, I'm going to get my drill bit, and I'm going to blast the hell out of that. I will get the other wheel done in probably 2 hours. Everything's set up, everything ready to go. And that's another important thing. Having your car jacked up, having the right clothes on. I'll tell you what, let me tell you what one of the things is that I have done in my life besides trying to be cute and use the wrong tools. You don't put on your raggediest clothes. I'm telling you this. You think, oh, well, I've done so many jobs in a car. I have so much knowledge. I have so much ability and skill that I think I can do this job without getting this shirt dirty. Forget about it. When you get onto that job, you start worrying about where can I touch myself? How can I lean? What part of my body do I cannot not move? I've got to watch for this and then that. I don't want to get my shoulder here, my elbow there. Look, when you're doing a job on a car, use your dirtiest, nastiest clothes that you don't have to think about all that stuff with. Don't do it. Don't wear anything that you're going to try not to get dirty. The purpose of wearing these clothes is to get them dirty. And if you're trying to be cute, you're going to be out there all day. Then you're going to have a sore neck or something. And then Richard sits there and says, Sam, how do you really feel about it?
I'd say, why don't you just get a jumpsuit?
He said, why don't you get a pair of coveralls? Amen. And you know what? Honestly, if I was going to give some advice, here's what I would tell everybody. I would say, okay, go to a store like Harbor Freight and get yourself 2 rubber chalk blocks. Put them on whatever side of the car you're going to lift. Then go and buy yourself these ramps. You've seen them, Rich. These ramps are like, I don't know, maybe 1.5 feet off the ground. And then you run your car forward or backward up onto these ramps. And then you have floor jacks that you put on there. You have your wheel chocks, you have your ramps, you have everything you need. Your car in, drive. You put the emergency brake all the way up, chalk everything really good. And then with the space that you've created, you go and you get yourself a creeper. So when you have to get up onto that car, you can just scoot around on those wheels, and God, it'll save you so much time and energy. It really will. And having your car up on those 2 ramps, these are 2 things you put in front of each wheel, and you just run the car up onto it. You get that done, and you will save yourself all kinds of trouble. Okay? So I think that's good enough. We can go ahead and shut it down.